In this lesson, we're going to learn how to interact with objects in the scene. We're going to go through methods of object selection, the use of object transform tools, and how to change the reference coordinate system and utilize different coordinate systems. Click on the 3ds Max application button. Click the Open button. From the Open File dialog, navigate to the Chapter 1 folder in the Understanding 3D Project folder. Select the file Chapter 1 Objects 01. Then click Open to open the file. What you see is a very simple scene made up of 3 different types of primitive objects: 1 teapot, 1 plane, and 3 spheres. We're first going to look at methods of selecting objects. The simplest way to select objects is by clicking on that object in one of the viewports. For example, in the left viewport, it's easy to click on the teapot. However, if you want to click on the plane, it would be easier in the perspective viewport. Go ahead and click on the teapot in the left viewport by clicking the left mouse button on top of the teapot. This selects the teapot object and makes it available for you to work with. Then, in the perspective viewport, click on the plane to select it. Notice that when you select the plane, the teapot gets deselected. Let's say you want to select more than one object. There are several ways to accomplish this. One way is to use the Control key while selecting objects. In the perspective viewport, you should already have the plane selected. Hold the Control key down and left-click on the teapot. Now you have 2 objects selected. If you look in the status bar in the lower left-hand side of the interface, you'll see that you have 2 objects selected. To deselect these objects, click in any viewport in an open space. Another way of selecting objects is to use a window or crossing window to select multiple objects at the same time. Let's go ahead and set a preference that will allow us to use a standard window when we drag in one direction and a crossing window when we drag in the opposite direction. In the main toolbar, click on the Customize drop-down menu. From the drop-down menu, choose the Preferences option. This opens up the 3ds Max Preferences dialog. Make sure you're in the General panel. If not, click on the General tab in order to open up the General panel. In the Scene Selection area, you'll see that I already have the Window/Crossing by Direction option checked. If you do not have it checked, go ahead and click in the checkbox for the Auto Window Crossing by Direction option. You'll see that we have the option for right to left or left to right to equal the crossing window. We're going to leave the right to left option active. Go ahead and click OK to close the dialog box. We're going to select the 3 spheres that are on the left-hand side underneath the plane. Place your cursor on the left-hand side of the top sphere near the middle of the sphere. Click and drag down to the right until you enclose the 2 spheres beneath where we originally clicked. When you release the mouse button, you should notice that you only have 2 objects selected. This is because we selected them with a windowed selection, and only the objects inside the window are selected. Click off in space somewhere to deselect all the objects. Now place your cursor on the right-hand side of the top sphere. Then click and drag down to the left and just make sure that the rectangle crosses all the objects. You'll also notice that this rectangle is not a solid rectangle, but is a dashed line rectangle. The dashed line represents the crossing window, whereas the solid line represents a windowed selection. When you release the mouse button, you should see all 3 spheres selected. Let's go ahead and transform an object. At the same time, we're going to learn a little bit about utilizing reference coordinate systems. In the top viewport, click on the teapot to select it. What we want to do is rotate the teapot so it's looking forward and up the plane. Then, we want to move the teapot based on the angle of the surface of the plane. That way, it looks like the teapot is moving up along the ramp. There are 3 ways to quickly access the transform tools. The simplest way is to use the keyboard shortcut, where W is the keyboard shortcut for move, E is the keyboard shortcut for rotate, and R is the keyboard shortcut for scale. The other methods are to use the toolbar buttons from the main toolbar. These 3 buttons represent the Select and Move, the Select and Rotate, and the Select and Scale tools. The third method is to choose the option from the right-click quad menu. Right-click on top of the teapot in the top view, and choose Rotate from the right-click quad menu. Press A on the keyboard to enable Angle Snap. This will allow us to rotate at fixed degree increments. In the top view, click on the ring for the Z-axis. It's the inside ring that looks like a complete circle in the top view. Click and drag the mouse up and rotate the teapot 90 degrees. If you've done this correctly, the teapot will be facing the plane. Right-click in the left view. This will activate the left view without deselecting any of the objects. This is a very important technique to understand. When you're working with objects, you'll be switching viewports on a regular basis. If you left-click in the viewport to activate it, you'll deselect any currently selected objects. So if you want to activate a viewport while you're working on an object, simply right-click. In the left viewport, click and drag on the Z rotation axis. Drag the cursor up and rotate the teapot 20 degrees. You may wonder why we rotated on the Z-axis in the top view and the Z-axis in the left view. That's because we're using the View Reference Coordinate System. Each viewport is represented by its own XYZ coordinate system. So changing from the top viewport to the left viewport also changes the coordinate system you're working in. Now, let's go ahead and move the teapot over to the ramp. Then we'll move the teapot along the plane so it appears to be going up the ramp. Press W on the keyboard to activate the Select and Move tool. In the left viewport, put your cursor over the X-axis of the transform gizmo. If you need to zoom out, you can use the middle mouse scroll wheel and scroll the wheel down. That will zoom the viewport out just a little bit. With the cursor over the X-axis, move the teapot over to the left just enough so that it appears to be on the surface of the ramp. To make it easier to move the teapot up the ramp, we're going to change the coordinate system to the ramp's local coordinate system and use that system to move the teapot. In the main toolbar, click on the Reference Coordinate System drop-down. Choose the Pick option from the drop-down list. From the top view, click on the plane object in order to use its reference coordinate system. Right-click in the left viewport. You'll see the axis for the transform gizmo now lines up with the plane. Place your cursor over the Y-axis, then click and drag the mouse up along the ramp. You should see the teapot moving along the surface of the plane, just like it's moving up a ramp. Using the proper selection options, along with transforms, while making use of the appropriate reference coordinate system, can make creating and editing objects in a scene much easier and much more efficient.